Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do that right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So I want to start today's episode by asking if this has ever happened to you. You're sitting at your desk at school and you're working on something and you just feel kind of off. You feel off. You're not sure what's wrong. You just feel maybe a little bit agitated or grumpy. Maybe you feel a little bit queasy or a little bit dizzy. You're just not feeling great. Maybe you feel out of sorts. Or maybe you feel really fatigued and you can't really describe it. You don't necessarily think that you're getting sick. You're just not sure what's wrong. And so that's why we say, maybe not to others, but maybe just inside of our own heads, we say, I'm feeling off today. Or I'm not sure what's going on with me today. And sometimes it also leads to feeling a little foggy and maybe you're not quick to make decisions, and it just impacts a lot of the different things that we try to do in our busy day as private school leaders. So I've had this happen to me dozens of times over the years, and it's not a great feeling. And especially with the pandemic, when we would feel that way, I think we were all hypersensitive to, am I coming down with something? And so when you're feeling off, it's, as I said, not a great feeling, but at other times, especially during the pandemic, it could even be worse. But here's what the problem is that we are always traveling at 100 miles per hour when we're at school. We're running to a meeting. We're trying to return a parent phone call. There's a student issue that comes up right after recess because somebody pushed somebody, and there's perhaps one of your teachers comes up to you and says, my daycare called for my child and my child is sick and I need to leave. And then you need to figure out coverage. And we're just running around 100 miles an hour with our hair on fire. Well, that's okay. We've talked a lot about being proactive on this podcast and different strategies to help us feel more in control of our day. But with all of the things that we have to do, when we're feeling off and we don't know why, it's a very unsettling feeling, and it also makes us not very productive and we don't make very good decisions. So over the years, I've figured out some strategies that have worked really well for me when I feel that way. And these strategies help me go from feeling out of it and feeling off to feeling much better. And I want to share those 7 strategies with you today. But before we get into today's topic, I want to give you a free gift to say thank you just for listening to the podcast. I've created a free guide for you called 5 Strategies to Help You Work with Difficult Parents. And we know that working with parents is part of the job, and that most of our parents are great, but some of them can be demanding and emotional and difficult. And this guide that I've created will give you the tools that you need to build better relationships and have better meetings with the difficult parents at your school. So you can go to theprivateschoolleader.com/parents and grab that guide. And thank you again for taking time out of your busy week to listen. And you can grab 5 strategies to help you work with difficult parents at theprivateschoolleader.com/parents. And one more thing before we jump into today's topic. I want to hear from you. If you are getting value from this podcast, I would love to hear from you. My email address is mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. That's mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. And just let me know how it's going with a new strategy that you're using. Maybe you picked up something on a podcast episode and you're using it at school. I would love to hear about that. Or you can email me with your biggest pain point that you're experiencing right now. I want to serve you better in future episodes, and I'd just love to hear from you and get that feedback. And again, That's mark.o.minkus@gmail.com, mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. Send me an email and let me know how things are going for you at your school. All right, so the topic today is what to do when you're feeling off and you don't know why. All right, I'm going to give you 7 strategies. The first 5 of these strategies are things that we can do when we're not really sure what's going on with how we're feeling physically. And I'm going to go through those 5 strategies and then talk about how we can be proactive about those. And then strategies number 6 and 7 are about when we're feeling really, really stressed or anxious and we're not sure why and what to do about that. So strategy number 1, when you're feeling off and you don't know why, is to drink 16 to 20 ounces of water. So I don't know who needs to hear this, but the bottom line is that we just don't drink enough water. We really don't. And if we're in the early stages of dehydration, we don't even know it. And most of us are in the early stages of dehydration during the day. And so if I'm feeling out of it, I'm feeling off, all the things I said at the top of the episode, I'm not sure what's going on with me. What I'll do is I'll get either a half-liter bottle or a 20-ounce bottle of water, and I'll just drink the whole thing down. And I don't mean sip it over the course of an hour. I mean drink the whole thing down right there within 30, 45 seconds. Just drink the whole thing. And almost always, I start feeling better within about 20 minutes. And I'm not going to get into the long list of benefits of drinking water. I'm sure that you know that. And many of you have wearable technology that sometimes you have it set to remind you to drink. And I see a lot of my teachers and some administrators at my school carrying around these big water bottles. And that's great. But if you're feeling off and you don't know why, you're not feeling great, you're feeling kind of weird, and you're not sure what's going on, strategy number 1 is drink 16 to 20 ounces of water. Just drink it right down, and most of the time you will feel better. Okay, on to strategy number 2. Strategy number 2 is stand up. So if it's always great to take a walk. We'll get to that in a moment. But if you don't have the time to do that, stand up. And I have a teacher at my school that often says, sitting is the new smoking. And I've heard him say that for a couple years. And I just kind of thought that was his saying, his phrase. But I Googled it, and there's actually an article by James Levine, a doctor that works he's actually the director of the Mayo Clinic at Arizona State University Obesity Solutions Initiative. I know that's a mouthful, but Dr. Levine is the one who first coined the phrase, sitting is the new smoking. And I want to read a quote. He believes, first of all, that people lose up to 2 hours off their life for every hour they spend sitting. And then he says, quote, sitting is more dangerous than smoking, kills more people than HIV, and is more treacherous than parachuting. We are sitting ourselves to death, says Dr. Levine. That's quite a quote. More dangerous than smoking, kills more people than HIV, more treacherous than parachuting. We're sitting ourselves to death. So I've also, when I was researching for this podcast episode, saw that there are more than recent studies show that standing just 3 hours a day is the equivalent of running 10 marathons a year. Now I can hear what you're saying. You're like, Mark, I stand way more than 3 hours a day. Well, maybe you do, but I think that most of us overestimate how much time we actually are spending standing in a day. Now, I know that we have some listeners that are administrators that also teach. And so, of course, you're teaching, you're standing. But a lot of what we do, the meetings, working at your computer, being on the phone, being on Zoom, driving to and from work, hanging out at home in the evening, a lot of things that we do, we're sitting. And there's really only one way to find out whether we're standing the 3 hours a day, that equivalent of running 10 marathons a year. There's really only one way to find out, and that's to track it. Track it for 2 weeks. Now, you may have some wearable technology, like a smartwatch, that will do this for you, and that's great. And maybe you already know, and you already have checked this box, and you know that you stand for more than 3 hours a day. But about 3 years ago, I got a standing desk, and it has been a real game changer for me. Not that expensive. I believe we got it at like Staples or one of these office supply stores, and I use it all the time. And so a standing desk, your wearable technology that gives you a reminder to stand up. And I just want to go back one more time to Dr. James Levine. I want to tell you a quick story. So maybe 3 years ago, I was at a driving range about a half an hour from my house. It was in the evening, and I'm sitting there taking a little bit of a break. I think I was there with my daughter, and I see this older gentleman, and he's over there hitting golf balls. And then a guy is hitting golf balls next to him, and then they strike up a little conversation. And the older gentleman, I would have no idea how old he was. I thought maybe he was in his early 70s. And I heard him tell this man, he said, well, I'm 80 years old. And he said, every day I go for a 2-mile walk. I come out here whenever I can to hit golf balls. I spend a lot of time in the garden. And he just listed a lot of the different things that he does. And he said, I'm 80. And when I turned 60, I retired from working at the steel mill. And he said there were a bunch of guys that retired the same time as me. And he said every single one of them are in the cemetery. And he said because they chose the remote control and the recliner chair and the couch. And he said, and I chose to be up and moving around. So maybe Dr. Levine isn't all that far off when he talks about how dangerous it is to be sitting all the time. And maybe my friend at work isn't all that far off when he says sitting is the new smoking. So when we feel off and we're not sure why, strategy number 2 is stand up. Strategy number 3, take a brisk 5-minute walk outside if possible. All right, I can hear what you're saying. You're like, okay, well, again, that's pretty obvious. That's a no-brainer. But I wonder how often we know things and then we don't do the thing. And so just like we don't drink enough water, just like we don't stand enough, we don't move around enough. And I'm including myself in that. I'll put myself at the top of that list. So you're sitting there, you're feeling off, you're feeling kind of weird. And this is very situational, but it's also a big bang for the buck, a huge return on your investment of 5 minutes of time. And so what I'll do is my office is on the 3rd floor. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll just get up and I'll walk down to the 1st floor, and then I'll walk down the hallway and walk back up to the 3rd floor. And sometimes that takes less than 5 minutes. I mentioned outside if possible. Obviously, there's the benefit to, if it happens to be a sunny day, that fresh air, all of those kinds of things. But what I want to really just encourage you to do is to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And I'll explain what I mean. We're so busy. I mentioned before how we're running around with our hair on fire, that these brisk 5-minute walks, they can actually be a little longer than that. And you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, meaning they're doing it at recess. You're doing it in the lunchroom. You're walking the halls during a class change. And so however long the periods are at your school, probably somewhere between 40 minutes and 60 minutes, that if you got into the habit of, whenever you're not in a meeting, to just walk the halls a little bit during that pastime, then you're getting up, you're moving, but you're also, what are you doing with recess and the lunchroom and the hallways during a class change. You are being a visible leader, and you're seeing your people, you're seeing the kids, you're interacting, and you're moving your body. And so strategy number 3 is to take a brisk 5-minute walk outside if possible. So we're looking at the 7 strategies for when you are feeling off physically, maybe feeling off mentally, and you don't know why. Number 1, drink 20 ounces of water. Number 2, stand up. Number 3, take a 5-minute walk. And number 4 is go hang out with the kids. Hanging out with the kids is the best part of my job. And last week, I came home from work, I think it was a Tuesday, and I was all grumpy. And I didn't even know why I was grumpy. I was just grumpy. And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to my wife, and she said, "Did you hang out with the kids today?" And I said, "Well, I think I did." But then I pulled out my phone and I pulled up my schedule, and I looked at my schedule, and what I saw is that I was in meetings all day, that I wasn't outside during that lunch recess block, and that I didn't actually hang out with the kids. And so I remedied that situation. The next morning was a Wednesday, and first thing when I got there, I went to the 4th and 5th grade homerooms, and then after the bell rang and morning announcements, then I went and did a couple things with hanging out with the middle school students, and altogether it was probably about 35 minutes, but boy, did it make a difference in my day. And I know that not every morning, I can't do that every single morning because of my schedule, but I really needed that. And it was so interesting that my wife, that was the first question that she asked was, "Did you hang out with the kids today?" So let's just think about this. This is why you do what you do. This is why you got into education in the first place. This is why you are a private school leader, is so that you can serve these kids, that you can serve their teachers. And so these kids, they bring us joy. But I think sometimes we get so busy being in our problem-solving mode, or if we're dealing with discipline issues, or if we're dealing with parents, or the board, or the finances, or transportation, or fundraising, or the building and the leaky roof, or the potholes in the parking lot, or all of the above and 500 other things, that we sometimes do the thing that's last on the list is spending time with the kids. And so if you're feeling off and you're feeling grumpy and you're just feeling kind of out of it, my advice, hang out with the kids fixes that almost every time. And what could it be? It could look like I said before, a class change, and just it could be greeting the kids as they come into the main entrance of the school. It could be walking around at recess or the lunchroom. Maybe you go into a classroom and read a story, or maybe there's a basketball game or a soccer game after school and you go, and you don't have to go for the whole thing. Maybe you're there for 15 minutes, but you know and I know that it makes a difference. It's just the fact that we sometimes feel like we're too busy to do those things, but the cumulative effect of that is not good. And so we need to remember to be proactive and hang out with the kids. All right, strategy number 5, when we're feeling off and we don't know why, is to eat some protein. So being hangry is a real thing. My wife gets hangry, and then I say, "Are you hangry?" And she says, "Yeah, you know what? I am." And let's face it, I'm not going to get into all of the science behind it, but when our glucose levels get low, we have mood changes, we have difficulty concentrating, we have more fatigue, we feel weak. And so what I would recommend, and I'll just tell you what I do, is that I have some high protein, low fat snacks on hand in my office. So I'm lucky enough to have a little fridge in my office, and I've got Greek yogurt in there, 15 grams of protein, 0 grams of fat. I think it's about 90 calories. Protein bar, about 12 grams of protein. It's about 5 grams of fat. I forget how many calories it is. But if you're halfway through the morning, and again, I know some of this is just so much common sense, and for some of these strategies, you're like, okay, I already do all that. But maybe you're going to glean something from one of these, but it's just so important that our body has fuel, because you may not be moving around that much, but we're expending a lot of emotional energy, and we're expending a lot of energy in making decisions and showing empathy, and we need that fuel. And if we're not feeling great and we're not sure why, we need to eat some protein. So like I said, have some high protein, low fat snacks on hand. And when you're mid-morning or mid-afternoon, just grab that, and don't have a bunch of junk around. I just make sure that my environment is free of, candy bars and all that stuff that's just empty calories, and make sure that it's only got my environment of my office only has things in it that are high in protein and low in fat. So before we get into the last two strategies, I want to just reflect on the first 5 for a moment, because we're going to be proactive and we're going to schedule these things into your day. Now, you're like, okay, well, that sounds weird. I'm going to schedule drinking water. And the answer is yes. I'm going to schedule standing up. Yes. Now, again, if you have wearable technology, some of you already have these things built into your Apple Watch or your smart wearable technology. Great. But whether it's drinking water or standing up or taking a 5-minute walk or hanging out with the kids, that's the thing that I schedule into my calendar. I want to pause there for a moment. So every week, the reason that on Wednesday mornings that I go to the 4th and 5th grade homeroom and I hang out with them for a few minutes and do a puzzle or draw a picture or talk to them about the game from the day before or something that they're looking forward to. The reason that happens is because it's in my calendar. Intermediate school homeroom. The reason that I go to morning meetings on Tuesday mornings with 4th and 5th grade is because it's in my calendar. And the prayer service and recess, every day that I don't have a meeting from 12 to 12:30, I'm at recess, and club time or after school sports. Now, I'll schedule all of those in there, and then things are definitely going to come up, and I'm not going to make it to all of them. But if I didn't have those in my calendar, I wouldn't be going to any of those things. And then all of a sudden it would be weeks and weeks. And then I would be like, wow, I really haven't been seeing the kids. And if you're not seeing your kids that often, you're also not seeing your teachers that often. And so again, I just want to put a plug in for that recess lunch block. And I've told you this before on the podcast, that what I do is about half of my teachers are on recess duty and about half of them are on lunch duty. And when I walk around for that half an hour of recess, half an hour of lunch, just most of my kids and most of my teachers can just do that quick check-in. Hey, how are you? And sometimes it's great because they have a question or they need a quick answer on something, and then there I am. So scheduling that or the high-protein snack, whatever it might be. But if we don't do these things until we're doing them in a reactive way, then we're always going to be kind of a step behind. And we're very proactive on this podcast. And so I would just ask you to pick one of those things that you should do. Drink water, stand up, take a 5-minute walk, hang out with the kids, eat a snack high in protein. One of those 5 things, and put it into your schedule. And if I had to pick just one, it would be hanging out with the kids, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes. So I told you before that the last 2 strategies, number 6 and 7, have to do with when you're feeling stressed or anxious and you don't know why and you're not sure what to do. So strategy number 6, I want to set the stage. I want to paint the picture for you. You're feeling stressed. You're feeling anxious. You're in your office. You are in the hallway. You're in the lunchroom. Wherever you are, you're feeling stressed. You're feeling anxious. Usually you know why you are, but there are a lot of times where you're just feeling that way and your blood pressure's up and you're not sure why. So strategy number 6 is to name it. I want you to name it. And what I mean by that is that I want you to think about brain science for a second and also how your body, your autonomous nervous system works. We all know about fight or flight. So your eyes see the bear, and you start running from the bear and you're in flight. And your body does all kinds of things with sending blood to the places where it needs to go, and your skin temperature, and you actually get tunnel vision, and just all these different things that happen during fight or flight. Well, here's the problem. If you're in your office and you're feeling all the things for fight or flight, your brain is kind of like looking around, but it doesn't see the bear. It doesn't see the source of danger. It doesn't see the thing that it's running from. And so then your body, your autonomous nervous system, is still running. It's still producing that acid in your stomach. It's still doing all of these things. And so what I've done, and this has really worked for me, is I stop and ask myself, okay, why am I stressed out right now? Why am I anxious right now? And maybe the answer is, well, there's a board meeting tonight. Or maybe it is I have to call that parent in 1 hour and I'm really not looking forward to it. Maybe I have to have a difficult conversation with a teacher. But when I name it, then I've found for me that it plays a little trick on my brain, because then the body, the brain, they're just sort of like, okay, the threat is no longer invisible, and so we can kind of stop, quote unquote, stop running. And so, like I said before, your body, your brain, your eyes and your brain, they're looking around, they don't see the bear, and so you're still in fight or flight, and you're anxious, you're stressed, you're nervous, your body's doing all these things. But I've found that if you name it, that then your body will stop running. It's worked for me. I encourage you to try it. I know it sounds so simple, but it works. And then strategy number 7 is called Take 5. So I've talked about this once before, just really quickly on the podcast, but I want to talk about a mindfulness technique that I use. If I'm feeling really stressed out, even if I know why I'm stressed out, or maybe if I don't know why I'm stressed out, but it takes about 2 minutes, a little bit more than 2 minutes, and I'll just talk you through it. And so it's called Take 5 because you're going to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's 5 things you see, and then you close your eyes, and then it's 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you taste. And so let me just walk you through it real quick. So you're all stressed out, you have 2 minutes, and you're just going to sit comfortably, and you're going to take a deep breath in on a 3 count, and you're going to take and then you're going to let that breath out on a 3 count. So a big in breath, 3, and then a 3 count out, and that's 1. So you're going to start, you're sitting comfortably, and you're going to do 5 things you see. So a 3 count breath in, I see the clock. 3 out. 3 in, I see the doorknob. 3 out. 3 in, I see my computer screen. 3 out. Okay? So you're doing 5 things that you see. And then you close your eyes. 3 in, I hear the air conditioner. 3 out. 3 in, I hear some kid talking out in the hall. Okay? And that's 4 things you hear. And your eyes are still closed. Now it's 3 things you feel. Again, you're doing the 3 count breath in, the 3 count breath out. Maybe you feel the weight of your body on the chair. Maybe you feel that your knee is a little bit sore. And then it's 2 things you smell. Maybe you smell something from the lunchroom. Maybe you smell, I don't know, something in your office. And then 1 thing you taste. Maybe it's your toothpaste from this morning or whatever. And then you open your eyes. And so that takes usually 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 10 seconds. And what I've found, again, it works for me. Maybe it won't work for you, but I think it's worth a try. Maybe you have your own mindfulness technique, but if you don't, this one's as good as any. And it's called Take 5. It's what I've heard it called. You're doing a 3 count breath in and a 3 count breath out. And for each one of those things, you're naming in your head 5 things you see. You close your eyes, then it's 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you taste. So those are the 7 strategies for what we're going to do when we feel off and we don't know why. So let's review them quickly in our big takeaways for today's episode. Strategy number 1, drink 20 ounces of water. Just drink it down. We don't drink enough water. Strategy number 2, stand up. Sitting is the new smoking. Standing 3 hours a day is the equivalent of 10 marathons a year. Strategy number 3 is a brisk 5-minute walk. Outside is best, but you can also kill 2 birds with 1 stone and be a visible leader if you do it at high visibility times of the day, but just do it when you need it. Strategy 4, go hang out with the kids. Kids will energize you, but you have to actually go and do it. Strategy number 5 is eat some protein. Just have some high protein, low fat snacks on hand in your office. And then the last 2 strategies, if you're feeling stressed or anxious and you don't know why, strategy number 6 is name it. Let your brain stop running from the bear by just naming what it is that you're stressed about so that the body can stop running. And number 7 is take 5, the mindfulness technique that I just described. So I like to end every episode with a call to action. And our call to action today is that we are going to be proactive. We're not going to be reactive. And I would like for you to pick just 2 of the things out of these 7 strategies, and some of the strategies had multiple things in it. I would like for you to just pick 2 things out of this episode and schedule them into your day or your week. And do that for a couple weeks, and then maybe shoot me an email. Let me know if it worked, if it didn't work. But I think that in my experience, that if we're proactive, that we're going to feel off less often. And then when we do feel off, if we have these strategies, then we'll know exactly what to do. So, wrapping it up, I just hope that you got value from this episode. I wanted to remind you about the free gift of 5 strategies to help you work with difficult parents. And you can get that at theprivateschoolleader.com/parents. And again, I want to hear from you. I want to hear about any strategies that you're using, pain points that you have, ideas that you have for a new episode on the podcast. Just send me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com, mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Today's show notes can be found at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 31. And a new episode of this podcast comes out every week on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can connect with me on Instagram at The Private School Leader, or Twitter. My handle is at The PS Leader. And if you got value from this episode, I would just love it if you would share this with another leader at your school or an aspiring leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I just want to say that I appreciate you and that you're making a difference at your school. And thank you so much for taking some of your precious time out of your busy schedule to join me here today. And I will see you next time on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.